In this video, we will discuss the early African farming communities and how they differed from the San and the Khoikhoi. But first, let's have a look at what is meant by the term farmer. Farmers are people who grow crops and raise livestock, shaping their lives around the rhythms of nature. When discussing important events throughout history, we need to understand how time is measured. Time can be divided into smaller parts. A year lasts 365 days. A decade spans 10 years. A century covers 100 years, and a millennium lasts for 1,000 years. The San hunter-gatherers were the first people in South Africa, living here about 20,000 years ago, or around 18,000 BC. Around 2,100 years ago, or 100 BC, life changed as Khoikhoi herders arrived in the western part of southern Africa. By 250 AD, farmers had moved into southern Africa from the north, settling across South Africa. By 250 AD, farmers had moved into southern Africa from the north, settling across southern Africa, except in desert and winter rainfall areas. What do we mean we speak of AD? AD stands for Anno Domini, meaning in the year of our Lord in Latin. BC stands for before Christ, used by Christians to measure time from the birth of Jesus Christ. For example, Europeans settled in South Africa in 1652 AD. An age categorizes time periods with common characteristics. For example, the Iron Age marked a time when African farmers used iron tools, contrasting with earlier ages like the Stone Age, when tools were made of stone. In traditional African communities, a household was where a wife and her children lived, and each household was managed by a wife. It was the smaller part of a homestead, which was a collection of households led by a husband or a headman. The husband spent time with each of his wives, but didn't have a separate household. The cattle kraal was at the center of the homestead and was the most important part of the homestead. Being in the middle ensured that the cattle could be protected from theft or harm. Villages were formed from several homesteads, with the headman answering to the village chief, who was the most influential and wealthy person. Inside the homestead, the headman and his family each had key responsibilities to make sure that the village thrived. The wife ruled over the household, looking after children and doing basic household tasks such as cooking and cleaning. The husband or headman would look after the homestead, making sure his family and cattle are safe and protected. He also answered to the village chief. The chief ruled over the village, keeping the peace between the different homesteads. He was also a mouthpiece between the normal people and the ancestors. Early farmers lived in small villages where they grew crops and raised cattle. Millet and sorghum were their main crops. Women took care of the crops, essential for feeding the people and livestock daily. Successful agriculture was crucial for village survival. When the soil became infertile, they moved to establish new villages based on climate and soil conditions. The right temperature and rainfall were necessary for growing sorghum and millet, which were vital for early African farmers. Every society has its way of organizing, with social, political, and economic structures that serve important purposes. This was true for early African farmers as well. In farming communities, those who controlled food and seeds held significant power, becoming kings, chiefs, or influential leaders. Others had to be loyal and obedient to share in these essential supplies. Rules and roles were crucial for maintaining peace. In early African societies, every family member had specific responsibilities. Younger men worked hard in fields, tended to livestock, hunted, and defended when needed. Women and girls cooked, brewed beer, fetched water and wood, and cared for children. They also worked in fields. Children were involved in farming early, with boys helping with animals, and girls assisting in households. Chiefs were vital, seen as closer to ancestors and protectors of their people. The chief's gathering place, the Gotla, was central, symbolizing authority and unity. Older men helped settle disputes, and the chief, often the wealthiest with many cattle, presided over justice, collecting fines in cattle and gaining cattle through raids. The early African farming societies had a strong sense of community and would often organize work parties and work together to get everything done. In traditional African farming communities, the cattle kraal was at the heart of the homestead, symbolizing the importance of cattle. Cattle were valued as special animals and a sign of wealth. African farmers, like the Khoikhoi, only slaughtered cattle for religious ceremonies. These ceremonies honored important events and ancestors. They also hunted wild game like the San and the Khoikhoi. Killing cattle for meat or hides was done thoughtfully, often using cows that were no longer breeding. Cattle hides were transformed into leather for clothing, typically made by men. Cattle played a vital role in lobola, where a bridegroom paid cattle to the bride's family before marriage. More cattle meant a man could marry more wives, who provided children and labor, increasing his power. Cattle were also lent to poorer families who used milk products and sometimes calves, fostering loyalty to the wealthy cattle owners. Farmers require sturdy, sharp tools for tasks like tree cutting and field cultivation. Iron and copper tools were superior to bone or stone tools. Iron Age farmers mined and smelted iron ore, using it for agricultural tools like hoes and axes, as well as for hunting and defense weapons. Iron tools were crafted by skilled men who collected ore, smelted it, and shaped it into tools at a furnace. This Iron Age technology surpassed Stone Age methods, enhancing farming and defense capabilities. Archaeologists study ancient remains like human and animal bones, skulls, and artifacts. Pottery, a type of artifact, provides valuable insights into past societies. For farming communities, pots were essential for storing water, milk, and food, as well as for cooking. Women crafted pots from clay, creating them in various styles, colors, and decorations. The Liddenberg heads, depicted in the photographs below, are significant artifacts revealing insights into traditional African farming communities. Archaeologists theorize that similar heads were used in initiation ceremonies for teenagers transitioning to adulthood. During these ceremonies, ancestors were invoked to accept young people as full community members. African farmers were connected with neighboring chiefdoms, even distant ones, for trading. Information about nearby villages was crucial for exchanges. Villages primarily focused on subsistence farming, growing crops, and raising livestock. They also crafted items for trade. For instance, villages rich in iron ore made iron tools, while those with copper produced jewelry. They traded these goods for cattle, with groups lacking these resources, then traded metal goods with the Khoikhoi for cattle, and with the San for furs. African farmers believed that after death, the soul became an ancestor in the spirit world. Elders were highly respected, as they would soon join the ancestors. Healers, known as sangomas or nyangas, had a close connection with ancestors and used herbal remedies to heal. Herbalists had deep knowledge of healing plants, often working with healers. Hunting provided meat, ivory, fur, and skins for trade, with the chief distributing spoils and claiming part for himself. Ivory was a symbol of power, crafted into jewelry for chiefly families. Skins and furs were worn by important men and chiefs, showcasing their status. The San were part of this trade network, exchanging animal products for metal items. Do you still remember the differences between the San, the Khoikhoi, and the African farmers?